Along the shore, the cloud waves break. The twin suns sink behind the lake. The shadows lengthen in Carcosa. Strange is the night where black stars rise, and strange moons circle through the skies, but stranger still is lost Carcosa. Songs that the Hades shall sing, where flap the tatters of the king, must die unheard in dim Carcosa. Song of my soul, my voice is dead. Die thou, unsung as tears unshed, shall dry and die in lost Carcosa. Let the red dawn surmise what we shall do when the blue light dies and all is through. The Yellow Sign. Part 1. There are so many things which are impossible to explain. Why should certain chords in music make me think of the brown and golden tints of autumn foliage? Why should the Mass of Saint Cecile bend my thoughts wandering among caverns, whose walls blaze with ragged masses of virgin silver? What was it in the roar and turmoil of Broadway at 6 o'clock that flashed before my eyes the picture of a still Breton forest, where sunlight filtered through the spring foliage and Sylvia bent, half curiously, half tenderly, over a small green lizard, murmuring, "To think that this is also a little word of God." When I first saw the watchman, his back was turned towards me. I looked at him indifferently until he went into the church. I paid no more attention to him than I had to any other man who lounged through Washington Square that morning. And when I shut my window and turned back into my studio, I had forgotten him. Late in the afternoon, the day being warm, I raised the window again and leaned out to get a sniff of air. A man was standing in the courtyard of the church, and I noticed him again, with as little interest as I had that morning. I looked across the square to where the fountain was playing, and then, with my mind filled with vague impressions of trees, asphalt drives, and the moving groups of nursemaids and holiday-makers, I started to walk my way back towards my easel. As I turned, my listless glance included the man below in the courtyard. His face was towards me now, and with a perfectly involuntary movement, I bent to see it. At the same moment as he raised his head and looked at me, instantly, I thought of a coffin worm. Whatever it was about the man that repelled me, I did not know, but the impression of a plump, white grave worm was so intense and nauseating that I might have shown it in my expression, for he turned his puffy face with a movement which made me think of a disturbed grub in a chestnut. I went back to my easel and motioned to the model to resume her pose. After working a while, I was satisfied that I was spoiling what I had done as rapidly as possible, and I took up my palette knife and scraped the color out again. The flesh tones were sallow and unhealthy, and I did not understand how I could have painted such sickly colors into a study which before had glowed with healthy tones. I looked at Tessie. She had not changed, and the clear flush of health dyed her neck and cheeks as I frowned. "Is it something that I've done?" she said. "No, I've made a mess of this arm, and for the life of me, I can't see how I've come to paint such mud onto the canvas," I replied. "Well, don't I pose well?" she insisted. "Of course, perfectly. Then it's not my fault." "No, it's my own. I am very sorry," she said. I told her that she could rest while I applied rag and turpentine to the plague spot on my canvas, and she went off to smoke a cigarette and look over the illustrations in the Courrier François. I did not know whether it was something in the turpentine or a defect in the canvas, but the more that I scrubbed, the more the gangrene seemed to spread. I worked like a beaver to get it out, yet the disease appeared to creep from limb to limb from the study before me. Alarmed, I strove to arrest it, but now the color on the beast changed, and the whole figure seemed to absorb the infection as a sponge soaks up water. Vigorously, I applied palette knife and turpentine and scraper, thinking all the time what a seance I should hold with Duval who had sold me the canvas. But soon, I noticed that it was not the canvas which was defective, nor yet the colors of Edward. It must be the turpentine, I thought angrily, or else my eyes would have become so blurred and confused by the afternoon light that I can't see straight. I called Tessie, the model. She came and leaned over my chair, blowing rings of smoke into the air. "What have you been doing?" she exclaimed. "Nothing," I growled. "It must be the turpentine." "What a horrible color it is now," she continued. "Do you think my flesh resembles the green cheese?" "No, I don't," I said angrily. "Did you ever know me to paint like that before?" "No, indeed." "Well, then." "It must be the turpentine or something," she admitted. She slipped on a Japanese robe and walked to the window. I scraped and nubbed until I was tired, and finally picked up my brushes and hurled them through the canvas with a forcible expression, the tone alone of which reached Tessie's ears. Nevertheless, she promptly began. "Oh, that's it! Swear and act silly and ruin your brushes! You have been 3 weeks on that study, and now look! What's the good of ripping the canvas? What creatures artists are!" I felt as much ashamed as I usually did after such an outbreak, and I turned the ruined canvas to the wall. Tessie helped me clean my brushes, and then danced away to dress. From the screen she regaled me with bits of advance concerning whole or partial loss of temper, until, thinking, perhaps, I had been tormented sufficiently, she came out to implore me to button her waist where she could not reach it, on the shoulder. "Everything went wrong from the time you came back from that window and talked about that horrid-looking man you saw in the courtyard," she announced. "Oh, yes. He probably bewitched the picture," I said, yawning as I looked at my watch. "It's after 6, I know," said Tessie, adjusting her hat before the mirror. "Yes," I replied. "I didn't mean to keep you so long." I leaned out of the window, but recoiled with disgust, for the young man with the pasty face stood below in the courtyard. Tessie saw my gesture of disapproval and leaned from the window. "Is that the man you don't like?" she whispered. I nodded. "I can't see his face, but he does look fat and soft, some way or another," she continued, turning to look at me. "He reminds me of a dream. An awful dream I once had. Or," she amused, looking down at her shapely shoes, "was it a dream after all?" "How should I know?" I smiled. Tessie smiled and replied. "You were in it," she said, "so perhaps you might know something about it." Tessie, I protested. "Don't you dare flatter by saying that you dream about me." "But I did," she insisted. "Shall I tell you about it?" "Go ahead," I replied, lighting a cigarette. Tessie leaned back on the open windowsill and began very seriously. "One night last winter, I was lying in bed, thinking about nothing at all in particular. I had been posing for you, and I was tired out, yet it seemed impossible for me to sleep. I heard the bells of the city ring 10, 11, and midnight. I must have fallen asleep about midnight because I don't remember hearing the bells after that. It seemed to me that I had scarcely closed my eyes when I dreamed that something impelled me to go to the window. I rose, and rising the sash, leaned out. 25th Street was deserted as far as I could see. I began to be afraid. Everything outside seemed so black and uncomfortable. Then the sound of wheels in the distance came to my ears, and it seemed to me as though that was what I must wait for. Very slowly the wheels approached, and finally I could make out a vehicle moving along the street. It came nearer and nearer, and when it passed beneath my window, I saw it was a hearse. Then, as I trembled with fear, the driver turned and looked straight at me. When I awoke, I was standing by the open window, shivering with cold, but the black-plumed hearse and the driver were gone. I dreamed this dream again, in March last, and again awoke besides the open window. Last night the dream came again. You remember how it was raining? When I awoke standing at the open window, my night dress was soaked. But where do I come into the dream? I asked. You were in the coffin. But you were not dead. In the coffin? Yes. How did you know? Could you see me? No, I only knew that you were there. Had you been eating Welsh rarebits or lobster salad? I began, laughing, but the girl interrupted me with a frightful cry. Hello? What's up? I said, as she shrank into the embrasure of the window. The man below the courtyard. He drove the hearse. Nonsense, I said, but Tessie's eyes were wide with terror. I went to the window and looked out. The man was gone. Come, Tessie, I urged. Don't be foolish. You have posed too long. You are nervous. Do you think I could forget that face? She murmured. 3 times. I saw the hearse below my window. Every time the driver turned and looked up at me. Oh, his face, so white and soft. It looked dead. It looked as if it had been dead a long time. I introduced the girl to sit down and swallow a glass of marsala. Then I sat down beside her and tried to give her some advice. Look here, Tessie, I said. You go to the country for a week or 2, and you'll have no more dreams about hearses. You pose all day, and when night comes, your nerves are upset. You can't keep this up. Then again, instead of going to bed when your day's work is done, you run off to picnics at Selzer's Park, or go to El Dorado's, or Coney Island. And when you come down here next morning, you are fagged out. There is no real hearse. There was a soft-shell crab dream. She smiled faintly. And what about the man in the courtyard? Oh, he's only an ordinary, unhealthy, everyday creature. As true as my name is Tessie Redrun, I swear to you, Mr. Scott, that is the face of the man below the courtyard, of the face of the man who drives the hearse. And what of it? I said. It's an honest trade. Then you think I did see the hearse? Oh, I say diplomatically, if you really did, it might not be unlikely that the man who drove it was below. There is nothing in that. Tessie rose, unrolled her scented handkerchief, and taking a bit of gum from a knot in the hem, placed it in her mouth. Then, drawing on her glove, she offered me her hand, with a frank, "Good night, Mr. Scott," and walked out. Hello, everyone. Zabub here. Sorry. Still something in my throat. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the special event that I have planned for October. I'm going to be doing all different types of stories, creepypastas, normal short horror stories, and other things that I've written here. Jeez. I'm sorry, again. As I was saying, I didn't originally plan to start off with the yellow sign from The King in Yellow. Actually, I read this at the beginning of my senior year, and it was a really good story. I enjoyed it, but it's not that I went out of my way to find this. I found a piece of the book on my porch when I came home from work, and I don't know, I guess I was just compelled to read it. So I'll be reading the other 2 parts whenever I can find them later on in this month. I'm sorry about all this coughing. It's this incessant buzzing in the back of my throat, and it's not just in my throat. I can hear it all the time. It's in my head, and it's making my brain itch. What is this voice? Get out! Get out of my head! Get out! How over-dramatic. Jeez. Made me hit my head on the desk. It shouldn't have been that hard to take over one human body. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Ooh, quite the vocal cords this one has. Hello, everyone. Hello, my brood. It is I, the Prince of Gluttony, the very one and only, Beelzebub. Yes. Well, I must say, I love that it is October, a month for us demons to really get out and stretch our wings. Yes, of course, I am here to make sure that you all overindulge, I might say, in the act of horror. And what better month to do that than October?
So I'll be making sure to bring you all prime time, wonderful stories from my very own collection. Don't worry about your wonderful narrator. I'm sure it'll be fine at the end of the month or whatever. I'm not here to cause any harm. I'm just here to make sure that everyone can overindulge in the horror festivities. I didn't really have much else planned, but I just really couldn't sit back and let this guy use my name anymore without getting involved personally. I mean, would you? Anyway, I hope you all do enjoy what I'll be calling Feastober. Yes, we'll be feasting on fear and horror from all around the globe. How wonderful. Have a wonderful night, my brood, and I'll be seeing you very soon.